Great. All right, everybody, I'd like to call to order the June 1st, 2020 meeting of the Newmarket Municipal Budget Committee. As always, we will start the meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And I apologize to anyone who's watching. I didn't mean to almost laugh there. It's just everybody else stayed on mute for the Pledge of Allegiance, and it felt a little awkward to be reciting it just by myself. So no disrespect intended, but it just felt a little strange, that's all. The other immediate piece of business, as with all of these remote meetings, is we are to read into the record a memorandum from the governor's office authorizing these remote meetings under an executive order, as well as take attendance, which we'll do in just a moment. So, as chair of the Newmarket Municipal Budget Committee, due to the COVID-19/coronavirus crisis, and in accordance with Governor Sununu's Emergency Order Number 12, pursuant to Executive Order 2020-04, this board is authorized to meet electronically. Please note that there is no physical location to observe and listen contemporaneously to the meeting, which was authorized pursuant to the governor's emergency order. However, in accordance with the emergency order, this is to confirm that we are providing public access to the meeting by telephone with additional access possibilities by video or other electronic means. Sub-bullet A, we are utilizing the GoToMeeting platform for this electronic meeting. All members of the board have the ability to communicate contemporaneously during the meeting through the GoToMeeting platform, and the public has access to contemporaneously listen and, if necessary, participate in this meeting through dialing the following phone number: area code 866-899-4679 and access code 477-3021, or by clicking on the following website address: https://global.gotomeeting.com/join/477-328-021. B, providing public notice of the necessary information for accessing the meeting. Sub-bullet A, we have previously gave notice to the public how to access the meeting using GoToMeeting, and instructions are provided on the Town of Newmarket's website at www.newmarketnh.gov. C, providing a mechanism for the public to alert the public body during the meeting if there are problems with access. Sub-bullet A, if anybody has a problem, please call area code 602-292-1221. D, adjourning the meeting if the public is unable to access the meeting. In the event the public is unable to access the meeting, we will adjourn the meeting and have it rescheduled at that time. Please note that all votes are taken during this meeting shall be done by roll call vote. Let's start the meeting by taking a roll call attendance. When each member states their presence, also please state whether there is anyone in the room with you during this meeting, which is required under the right to know law. So with that taken care of, we'll do a quick roll call attendance. Jeff Robb.
Present and alone.
Thank you. Rob Ortons.
Present alone as well.
Thank you. Roger Cady.
Present and alone.
Joe LaMattina.
Present and alone.
John Baldy. You went on mute there for a moment. Can you just repeat that, John?
Sure, I'm present and alone.
Thank you. Mike LaBranch.
Present and alone.
Eric Wagode.
Present and alone.
Zachary Dumont.
Present and alone.
Mike Kennison.
Present and alone.
And for the public's knowledge, we have two invited guests this evening. The first is the town manager, Steve Fournier. Are you alone, Steve?
Yeah, I'm alone.
Thank you. The other invited guest is Dave Jack, the interim business administrator for the school district.
Present and alone.
Thank you, Dave. All right. So the first order of business this evening is to approve of our April 27th meeting, which I sent out by email earlier. Did anybody see anything in the minutes that would require revision? Actually, first I should ask for a motion to approve the minutes.
I make a motion to approve the minutes.
Thank you,
Second.
Joe. Thank you, Roger. So the floor is open. Did anybody see anything in the minutes that requires editing or revision?
Yeah, I did. I don't have the line numbers, so it's on page 3,
All right.
second paragraph down.
Yes.
Almost the last line there says tax anticipation note. It should say note instead of Nate.
Good catch. Thank you, Joe.
And then also then fall right after that is, and the order will be amended. There's a word hat there to allow, I think, to just cross out the word hat.
We have a stray hat that made it into the minutes.
Other than that, I didn't see anything, any issues.
All right. Anybody else have any recommended edits for the minutes? Going once, going twice. All right, we will do a roll call vote to approve the minutes as of those two items. Jeff Robb,
Aye.
Rob Ortons,
Aye.
Roger Cady,
Aye.
Joe LaMattina,
Aye.
John Baldy,
Aye.
Mike LaBranch,
Aye.
Eric Wagode,
Aye.
Councilor Dumont,
Aye.
Mike Kennison.
I abstain, I wasn't there.
Thank you. So we are unanimous, less one abstention on approving the minutes of our last meeting. On to new business. As I said, we have two invited guests tonight to give us updates and answer any questions the committee might have on the sort of year-to-date performance of the town and the school district relative to their budgets. We'll start with Steve Fournier, the town manager, who will give us who sent out the other day, I forwarded it along to the committee, the financial report through the end of April. So if Steve, if you'd just give us a quick overview of what you sent out, and
Sure.
Thank you.
First of all, at the end of the third quarter, we expended 83% of our operating budget. Well, it's higher than 75% where we should be. Lower than our run rate of the last few years. Last year, at this point in time, we expended 87% of our operating budget. So there's nothing out of the ordinary for our expenses at this time. So I'm going to roll this into sort of a pandemic / budget report for the next portion, because I think one of the big areas that we've been monitoring are revenues and where we are. So at the end of April, please understand that we're not discussing end of May. This is just a month back. Our motor vehicle registrations were at about $1.35 million. We were really concerned about that due to the fact a lot of vehicles weren't just weren't being registered. A lot of vehicles weren't going to be purchased during that time. However, if you look at our previous year's revenues, we're about right on target. It was $1,337,000. So it's a little bit off. We expect a little bit higher, but it's not a dip, which we were really anticipating. Water and sewer, we did see a dip there. The reasoning is we're not shipping people off for non-payment right now. So last year at this point in time, we had $708,000. $357 in revenue. We're down to $672,588. So we're still not going to do the shutoffs during the pandemic, during emergency order. However, we want to remind individuals that this is not a bill. This is a deferment of your bill. So as soon as the pandemic is over, you will have to pay the water and sewer bill that you have been deferred on. If there's a hardship, we can look at an abatement, but at this point in time, we're not seeing that. Tax revenue, we're slightly above. Last year, we're at 22 million. We're about $1 million higher at 23. Tax bills have gone out. We're encouraging people to pay them online because we're still not open to the public at this point in time. We are working on reopening plans, but it's going to be much more difficult and different than we used to see when we came in to town hall. Now, for expenses, at the end of April, we didn't have a lot of pandemic expenses at that point in time. For materials and equipment costs, we had about $11,678, and overtime was about $1,570. Most of that either it will be reimbursed by FEMA. FEMA is going to reimburse any overtime for the PD and fire. And then what we have is the Gopher account, the government's office of, I always get this one wrong, for economic, and there's an R in there, I don't know, but it's called the Gopher account. That's the government's money that he's providing municipalities to buy equipment that would not be through FEMA. So we're anticipating those, both those items to be offset there. Understand of what we're purchasing are PPE, decontamination equipment, and IT equipment and software licenses so we can work remotely. And what we're on here right now is what we've been paying for. We're paying for
This conference will now be recorded.
In addition, one of the things we're going to have for large expenses is we're now beginning to discuss how we're going to hold our 2 elections this coming year. While we're encouraging people who don't feel safe to get an absentee ballot in accordance with the Secretary of State and governor's orders, we still need to provide a physical polling location. The moderator, the town clerk, and I, and Rose, the emergency management team are working on a plan. We're going to bring that up to the town council on Wednesday night. But in addition, we're going to have to purchase a lot more equipment. Everything from plexiglass, acrylic barriers between election officials and the public, to signage, to anything you're seeing at a grocery store or any kind of store. We're going to have that for the elections and just our general operations. So we're going through that now. And also, what do we have to purchase for equipment to reopen? Again, town hall will not look like it did when you left. The last time you were in there. We're still going to have to do social distancing. So we have to limit the number of individuals in specific offices. So we're still trying to figure that opening plan as well. The governor earmarked about $225,000 for us for the Gopher Fund. FEMA funds are different. That's what we have to go to the feds. It's a little different process, but with the Gopher funds, we've been earmarked that amount, so we can go from trying to get those kind of funds there. Just general operations. Right now, it's basically needing to try to figure out how we're going to operate and do reopenings. Today, we met with, for example, the presidents of all the leagues in town to explain to them the new rules that they have to follow to their sports pickup, which definitely does not look normal. It's no games, practices of only 9 individuals plus the coach. So it's going to look quite different. That is really where we are. I just want to take this opportunity also just to commend all the department heads. They've been watching, even though it's a national emergency, they've been watching the budget as well to make sure we adhere to the guidelines with the state so regarding the expenses that are reimbursable, and we're trying the best we can to make sure whatever we do is reimbursed. Other than that, I want to let the budget committee know that I have appointed Bill Tappan as the Director of Finance and IT. So the town now has a full-time CFO, which, to be honest, it has not happened since I've been in Newmarket. We had a contracted individual, and then we had a shared services with the school. So now we do have a full-time CFO for the town side. And that's all I have tonight. If there's any questions, I'm here for that, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Steve. Appreciate it. Questions for the town manager?
Yeah, I have one. So Steve, you were looking to maybe withhold some monies from the capital reserve funds. Where do you stand on that?
Well, after looking at the law, we don't actually have the authority to reduce the budget. What the problem is in our form of government is that since we still have a town meeting for the budget, once the voters approve a budget, those monies have to be raised. We don't have the authority to reduce the budget after it's been appropriated. So as of right now, I can tell you the municipal association is looking for an emergency order to allow municipalities to reduce the budget. But if not, we still have to appropriate the entire amount. So it's really not going to do anything good if we withhold those funds and not give it to the capital reserve fund, because it's already been appropriated by the budget committee, by the voters.
And so
I'm sorry, Joe.
what's the likelihood that the governor is going to approve, give you guys authority to make changes to the operating budget?
We don't know. We asked a few weeks ago and we haven't heard anything. It's usually going to go quick turnaround on emergency orders. The one thing that they're concerned about is that by doing so, you're circumventing the will of the voters. Which is an interesting thing because I would also, there are a couple, because again, remember, we're not the same kind of government as normal town meetings, but there's a couple council forms of government that do have the authority to do that in your town charter. That's something to consider in the future. My biggest concern would be if our revenue dries up, that we still have to appropriate those funds. Because if the revenue dries up and they don't have any, but we still have to appropriate those funds, that means we have to raise the tax rate.
And I apologize if you had covered this, but how are you doing on tax collections or property taxes?
So we just sent the bills out. But, tax revenue right now is we're at 23 million. For 2020, last year at this point in time, we're at 22, so we're doing okay. It'll be interesting to see in the next week or so, because usually as soon as there's a group of people that as soon as you get the tax bill, they'll come in and they'll pay the bill right away. So we're going to try to monitor it, see how it's in the next week or so.
Steve, do you know what portion of the property taxes are paid by escrow? And what portion is, do we have that information?
I don't, but it's a significant amount, so we're not really worried about that. We think the money's still going to come in because of that. We're more worried about the individuals who don't have mortgages anymore, that they may have to pay them, pay the taxes through their bank accounts versus their normal just paying a mortgage company. But again, we're monitoring that as well.
Other questions for Steve?
And I actually want to add one thing. So there's a number of revenue sources that we have from the state that, for example, the highway fund, we receive a lot of money to do road projects with the gas tax. Well, that's actually, we're getting those figures based on last year's numbers. So the amount of money we're going to get is set already. So we're not going to see the budget impact and lots of revenue there. We're going to see it the following fiscal year. Because the lack of people driving, the lack of people running meal tax, the lack of people going to hotels and restaurants, that's when it's going to hit us more. But we're just trying to prepare for that now.
So let's just make sure everybody understands the timing on that, because I'm not 100% clear on it. So the money that'll be dispersed by the state in the upcoming fiscal year is based on what the state is collecting in the current fiscal year?
Well, actually, for what we're going to get was based on last year.
Okay.
There's nothing going on. Economy was good. People are out there buying things. People are driving. Then we got this situation. So we're going to get hit by this next year. Room and meals, we could probably get hit sooner. But gas and the highway, we're probably not anticipating that until next year.
When you say next year, you mean fiscal year 2021?
Fiscal year 21, 22.
21, 22. Okay.
Right, and I'm preparing the next budget.
All right. So that's something we'll have to put some thought into, looking ahead to that.
Yeah.
Steve, can you just, I just don't remember how the treatment of this works. So when we put money into a capital reserve fund, that's in the expense side of this. If we're drawing on a capital reserve fund, do we see those proceeds in the revenue side, or how do those manifest in this report?
Depends on which ones. I know there's been a question, and we reiterated, because there's been a question about the revenue of $180,000 out of capital reserve funds. The reason why that there is not because it comes from the general fund, it comes from the enterprise fund from water and sewer. So we did have to book that on there. The monies that are in there are actually for 3 capital projects. There's a garage conversion for storage space for water and sewer of $50,000 approximating this. Old maintenance building conversion for office space down there for $30,000, and probably for new, looking to get a new water tower for approximately $100,000. So the estimate there is the estimated revenue of 180. So that's why it's there.
All right, and just help me out. Where do I see that on this report that you've sent out?
It's not on there, it's in the budget.
Okay.
So we don't have that on that part. Because that's actually in the next fiscal year.
Next fiscal year.
Yeah.
All right, I just want to make sure I'm not missing anything here. Other questions for Steve?
Yeah,
One.
when are we gonna get back to normal here? When's the town hall gonna open up and
We don't know. We're trying to figure that out now. We want to make sure it's safe for the people who are coming into town hall as well as the employees. Remember, right now the governor's order is still in place that we can more than 10 individuals. So, for example, this meeting cannot be held because there's more than 10 people. We're waiting for some of the things to be open more, but my biggest concern is once we open, we're a public building, so we have to make sure we can't deny access. We want to make sure what rules that we can follow versus, a private business can say, look, I can require a mask. I can require this screening before you come in. We don't have clarification on what we can and cannot require.
Seems like an important consideration. All right. Any other questions for Steve?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I got a question. Steve, it's a 2-part question. Has any decisions been made on summer rec programs?
We're going through that now. Our big thing is we're pushing to open it. I know a lot of municipalities canceled. The reason is if the economy is going to reopen, we know that we're used for childcare for people going back to work. And we want to make sure, we're trying to make sure we can get some kind of programming up. We should have something, the rec director is going to be providing me with a report shortly to make it safe. But it's going to look very similar to what the athletic programs are going through. Small groups, facilities not open, no field trips, no traditional things like arts and crafts may not be there the same way it was, but we still want to be able to provide the young people with some kind of normalcy this summer too, to let the parents go back to work.
Okay, the main reason for that question was knowing that the rec department basically runs all of their programs from the revenues during the summer program. How is this going to potentially affect their budget for the next fiscal year?
Yeah, that's a good question. They're going to not hire as many camp counselors. We're going to have to reduce the numbers there. We're going to have to reduce programming. They're just trying to, that's what we're trying to figure out. And that's another question is if we're not offering the same program, do we charge the same price for the same program? That's one of the big concerns as well. So that's what we're trying to find out right now. But originally, there's been a lot of cities around us that have already canceled. I know Exeter and Portsmouth have canceled their summer rec programs. But we just felt that it was, we needed to make sure we had something to help the people out there right now. But that's what we're trying to monitor as well as the lack of revenue.
Okay.
other questions for Steve? Anybody feel something inspired by any of the early comments? Going once, going twice. Thank you, Steve. Appreciate your time. All right. Our other invited guest this evening is Dave Jack. For those who haven't had the pleasure, Dave's the interim business administrator for the school district, and he's here to give us an update on the school district's year-to-date financial performance and answer questions, as people have them and as he's able to. So, Dave, take it away, please.
Good evening. I think you have the April 30th financial report that we presented to the school board in front of you. I'll just really revisit that, go over and highlight a couple of pieces. I can also extend it out a little further since we've come through another month since then, but we haven't formally done another report for the end of May yet. So initially, if you look at your report, the top part of it is a revenue report. The good news there is your revenues are where they should be. They're on schedule. You have essentially $90,000 to $100,000 of excess revenue. We underestimated, or we got revenues that we didn't anticipate. So right now we're looking at about 91, 92,000. It may go up a little bit more before the year finishes. So that's a good news story. It's always a better position to be in coming to this part of the year. The second piece, and what I'll do is I'll go through the whole report and then we can revisit any part that you want. The second piece are the expenditures. The expenditures were as of April 30th. As you can see, we have right now showing as a balance about $1.3 million. That's probably generally where you would be at this point in the year. When I say a balance, that means it's unencumbered. That doesn't mean there won't be more monies expended out of there. I can already tell you that that amount has lowered by about another $250,000 to $275,000 since this report was given through additional expenditures that aren't normally encumbered. So most of what you see, the reason for the balance, there's a couple of reasons for the balances. None, and I'll bring up the most obvious first, is COVID-19. The pandemic has meant that there have been some expenditures that we take, so the balances are still there, such as things like substitute teachers during this period of time. The use of substitute teachers really finds a peak from about March, late March into the end of June. It seems to be when the usage is at its highest level. So, there's areas there. The other pieces there would have been the hiring delta, which I refer to as when folks were retired last year or have left the districts, and we then find new staff. A lot of times the staff is less, sometimes it's more, but at any rate, there is a savings there this year. So that is part of the number we're seeing there. And when we presented this to the school board, one of the pieces that concerns everybody, and I'm sure it concerns the budget committee, is what do you anticipate having left at the end of the year? Last year, when you set your tax rate, we set a tax rate with an unassigned fund balance, which means monies that are comprised of excess revenues and those monies that were not spent at the end of the year. And I think Newmarket's number was around 415,000 last year that we used to set the tax rate in October. When we last spoke with the school board, and the school board revolved around having in the neighborhood at that time of about 600,000 left to turn back this year because of some of the expenditures. So that's the target that we're looking for. We're still working on those numbers, so it's not quite evident. We won't have the exact numbers. We actually won't have the exact numbers until we get to the very end and to, through an audit and so forth. But we can at least anticipate at this point in time, very safely, I think that we would have $600,000 left as an unassigned fund balance. The other pieces that we're tracking, and to go along with Steve's comment on the COVID-19, we are able to access two sources of potential funding during this crisis. One is FEMA, just as the town has, and so there are some expenditures that hopefully we can put in there. And the other piece for schools is what's called the CARES program. It's a federal program. They run it through what we call Title I grant. We know that we are in the neighborhood of about $108,000 to $110,000 that has been associated with Newmarket. So with that's if that money, when that money comes in, we'll have to have expenses through COVID-19 in order to do this, that would allow us to access those funds and bring those back. So some of the all the expenses that are related to COVID-19 as we're going forward have been identified in separate line items in the budget. We actually created about another 25 to 30 line items so that we could make sure that as we expended things, two things happen. One, it still allows us to do the reporting we have to the state, but secondly, it allows you to access the information you need to be reimbursed for anything through these programs very rapidly and identify that and not get lost in your budget where you might forget it or overlook it as we go down the road further. These grants are, that's the initial piece on CARES. It's an 18-month grant, so it's going to span an 18-month time period for that, which allows us, as we continue along the road, to access that. And I'm not sure if there will be any more money coming forth. There's a lot of questions that are not answered at this point on what's eligible, and we're working with the state on those particular pieces. So that kind of gives you a little bit of an overview. As far as the school district in general, there's a lot of planning going on, as I know Mike is involved with steering committee as to what things are going to look like as we move forward. Nothing is determined at this point, but certainly there's a great deal of dialogue going on with locally and on the state level as to how we'll proceed and what it will look like in the upcoming months. I mean, everybody is struggling with the same pieces. There will be additional costs. There's no question to that. And we tried to ramp up this year already with technology that allows us to continue the remote learning and to do the remote learning as we're doing it today. So that kind of highlights where we are. I'd be happy to answer any questions, and if I've overlooked something, please feel free to ask.
Dave, thank you.
Actually, I have a couple. Thank you. That
One
was
observation,
I'm sorry. Mike, go ahead.
Go ahead, Chair. Go ahead.
I was just going to say that I really appreciate the thoroughness and depth of your introductory comments and the quality of the report. That very, very focused. I appreciate it. Mike, there was something you wanted to add to the to Dave's explanation?
Yeah, thanks, Dan. Just I don't know as it's indicated on your summary, but we're also going to return, I think, about 150,000 from bond interest that's not allocated. Can you cover that?
1 second, I'll unmute. Okay, yes, that's part of the thinking. That will become part of the unassigned fund balance. So what's happened is when you went through your March meeting, there were several warrant articles that accessed the bond is allowed for things to be bought through what accrued from the bond interest. We think the bond interest is going to be someplace in the vicinity or slightly north of about $825,000. That's what the bond had gained in interest over the time that you took on the project. You also passed some warrant articles in the March meeting, and I think it comes into around 700 and some thousand. what's going to happen in the end is you're going to have anywhere from about $110,000 to $135,000 worth of interest that has not been spoken for, in essence, has not been voted at the March meeting, which you have to do. That also will be returned in the unassigned balance. We haven't divided that out to say 600,000 at this point, but that money will be coming back as we go forward. So that also will be another piece that comes into play on top of both the unexpended balance, the revenues that were in excess, and then this piece. And that's a good pickup, Mike, because I did know about that, but had forgotten to mention it. Thank you.
So
A
I'll
couple of questions
kick it off.
regarding some of the lines. Okay, I'm sorry, I was off. A couple of questions regarding the lines, if you can answer them, Jack. The improvement of instruction line that's in a whole 91%, was that the Chromebooks? Do you know that?
I'm hitting the wrong mute part. Yes, a lot of it had to do with the technology that was bought most recently and so forth. That was approved at a school board meeting several meetings ago, and things we needed to ramp up.
Okay, and the school board line, is that pretty much legal expenses?
A good deal of that is legal expenses. You certainly have a large legal line there, yes.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Hey, Dave, so you mentioned that you're anticipating about another $250,000 that has, I guess, come to light since this report was put together. Did I understand that correctly?
That's correct. And one of the pieces that I think Eric has just mentioned is the Chromebooks. When we did this in between the Chromebooks, for example, this report was 1.3. Well, some of that is in the Chromebooks, but I'm going to take that back because I'm thinking off two different times here. Additional expenditures are things that we would have made. Now, I'm not sure that we had additional Chromebooks from that on. These are additional expenditures that we wouldn't necessarily have had encumbered any place that we would have been paying as we go along here. I'd have to go back and look at the exact pieces. All I did was look at a bottom line on a report that I did for myself today to see how much this had been reduced. So if we looked at the balance, for example, of 1.338 million that we have as a balance, when I look today, it has moved down to 1.075. So there's some significant pieces in there. I don't have the exact areas. I thought it was the Chromebook, but I would not be speaking correctly if I said that. So I'd have to go back and look at that.
All right. Yeah, I was kind of, I came away with two different impressions that are mutually exclusive. That it sounded like you're, in response to Eric's question, you were saying that the 107,000 negative balance on improvement of instruction already included the Chromebooks, but
and to your point, I believe that to be correct. Yes, but I can't tell you where the other pieces are that have reduced this balance down further as we go forward. But I will get back to you on that if you would like.
Yeah, I appreciate just getting a general breakdown of where that lies, in this similar sort of, I don't know if everybody feels the same. I kind of find this presentation really useful for getting a quick idea of what's going on. I see a couple of nods on the screen from folks, but it's quick and straightforward, and my eyes are immediately drawn to where I think I should be paying attention. So again, I appreciate the way it's laid out. Other questions for Dave?
Yeah, I have one, and I apologize if it's the same thing that you just asked her. But last month you were looking at a surplus of $450,000, and now you're saying that surplus is going to be $600,000. I was just curious, what is the other 100?
The other piece that we added back into it was the piece that Mike Mike has referred to, which was more around the thinking of what was left over for the bonds. So there's some other expenditure pieces, but we know there's another 110 to 135,000 that'll be coming back as a piece that can't be expended, that has to go back to an unassigned fund balance, in essence, to reduce taxes. So that thinking, and as we go forward, Joe, more and more, what we'll do is we'll refine exactly what that is, because for lack of a better term, we're going to run out of real estate here. We only have 2 months, a month left. So most of our expenditures are starting to come to an end now, and we can begin to look and see what we have to do to the end. There are still some considerations I'm sure that the school board will be dealing with in terms of COVID-19 and what that's going to look like, and other pieces that we'll have to deal with that may have to be dealt with now in order for us to move forward next year.
Thanks. Other questions?
I have another question. Maybe it's more directed to Mike as opposed to Dave, but when are they going to hire a full-time financial person? And then the second part, I guess, of the question is for Dave. Is the budget now in a semi-formal state where, we can look at what was expended last year and what you're proposing next year and see that, A goes to A, B goes to B, that type of thing. So first question is for Mike, I guess.
Mike?
All right, so I'm trying to find my mic button. Yeah, we hired full-time BA and Dave will be with us till the end of the month. She'll start on July 1st.
Okay, so you do hit.
Yeah, and you know what I can do for the budget committee is that I thought it was already sent around in public, but I can send you her background so you have an idea of who she is.
I think that's fine, but if she's going to be on board next month, maybe we can have both Dave and her there present.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the second part of that was for Dave. Is the budget in a semi-jello state, or whatever what you want to call it, where next year when we get a budget, we'll be able to see, last year, this line item is carried over to this year, as opposed to what we had last year was, we had some stuff in one budget item, then this year showed $0, and another place there was another line item that had $0 last year and now $100,000 this year.
So let me just dovetail off what Mike said so that you understand the transition between myself and the new person coming on board. The new person is Jana Mellon. I'll actually be meeting with Jana for approximately 4 or 5 days in the month of June, transitioning. So she'll come on board for at least that amount of time over the next 25, 30 days. So the transition should be fairly seamless when Jana arrives. And it's a good way to do it. I can give her the knowledge that I've picked up, and she can meet folks. So when she comes on board, and she's very capable, I think you'll find it to be a relatively seamless transition, and I think you'll be very happy as to where you've landed on this piece. As far as the budget, I'll only qualify this. I came in somewhere in February, late January. I was part of the budget development for the FY21. So I can't unequivocally tell you that what you're asking for, Joe, is absolutely there. What I can tell you is, having looked at the budget, I do understand how it was put together. I think that it's very transparent in terms of where it is. I think that we're rolling over the new FY21 budget in our software so that we will be able to utilize it in the next week or so, because we have to start processing some of the things through, even though we don't order things, we still, while we have staff here, they'll start to put in requisitions for next year, that type of thing. Having said that, I think that it's that what when you get the budget, the bottom line will reflect what you voted. The line items are lined up as to how they were budgeted going forward. And I think that with every budget, you're budgeting 18 months in advance. So as you know, it's an estimate. If you're looking to compare expenses from this year into next year, I wouldn't say that when you get to this time next year, that you can always look at things and compare. This is a very unusual year. Keep in mind unusual things since March the 23rd. So your comparison from one year to the next is going to be skewed, and it will be skewed as long as we're in this pandemic. So things that we never had to do and expenses end up in places we never had them before. Going forward, whatever the model is, however we go forward, these will be years where they're not normal. And so the history will look at it and say, probably 5 years from now, somebody might want to look back as we're budgeting and things don't seem to be high in this year. And you'll recall why it was, because we had to put things, the purchase of technology, for example, just to get us up in to remote learning. If you look next year, you won't see that in those particular things. So things like that'll be different. But I think what you're asking is around the transparency of the budget and whether things are spent where they're supposed to be. I think that anytime, whether you have the money in account, if that's where the purpose of it is, you put the budget item in that line item. If there's not enough funding in there, then but you actually need it and it's been approved, then you would determine where the money is going to come from to offset that deficit in there. So the way it operates in the business office right now, the expenditures are being put where they're supposed to be put. And I would expect that forward.
Good job. Thank you. Appreciate that.
I had another question for Dave. As far as you'd mentioned that we're attempting to identify expenses that we can potentially recover under the CARES Act, under other sources of funding that become available relative to related to the pandemic. I guess two questions. One, do we have a general sense of the total amount that we think might fall into those buckets? And is that, I assume that money would manifest as revenues offsetting the 2020/2021 tax rate, or how far into the future would that money manifest itself in the tax rate?
I'm not sure, Dan, where it's going to land, what fiscal year. When we do, I think your next tax rate setting will be in October of this coming year, so that I don't know if we would have accessed that 108,000, or to that end, if we anticipate that, we can anticipate as a revenue, it would be, we'd have to make sure we're going to receive that in order to get it. What I can tell you is the 100, if we have the expenditures, we would have already made the expenditures, so it's going to be, it'll be treated as revenue, and those expenditures, you either have an excess revenue or you are going to take the expenditures and redirect them toward that grant, which is probably going to be the case, which means that you'll have $108,000 less of expenditures somewhere along the way that you've already counted as. So it'll free up that money in your budget. I can't tell you exactly when that's going to happen because this is an 18-month grant. So it probably is going to go into FY21. Having said that, it's going to affect probably next year, somewhere along the way. That's where it's going to affect. The types of expenditures, I think was the second part of your questions, is not always as clear. Initially, we were asked if we would support the idea of trying to keep people employed. I mean, we all went to great lengths. I think it's all districts and all communities to try to keep people employed. One of the ones that comes to mind is our busing, the contract with our busing. They gave us a discount, if you will, on the monthly amount. But the intent there was to keep their people so that when this comes back and when we need busing, they would have their folks and we would continue as normal. We're not, if that's a part of things that we can claim for. The direction that we received came from the state, but nobody was clear on that. So the last time we had any type of meeting with that and direction around that was still an unanswered questions. Things that we can claim from are any PPE stuff, we have purchased some large units to help sanitize schools, large areas and so forth. So that purchase was out there. Those are things I think are very applicable and we'll have no problem with. So there are significant amounts of, or significant areas that we will be able to do that. The other piece that came into play here that is not normal is your food service operation. Food service was continued, as you know, for all the students. And what happens there is the federal government is reimbursing Newmarket for all of its meals as if they were free. So whatever we have served since March 23rd, since this came on board, we are being reimbursed for that. So even though we're getting half the meals, we are getting probably double the reimbursement. That's still not going to bring everything and make it all whole, but it's pretty significant. And I don't know how long that will continue, but the food service program has managed to continue. It continues to service the community, and I don't think anybody is denied access to it.
That's actually been a tremendous thing for the community. I personally think everybody really appreciates it. My other question is more for Mike, actually, and please, I don't want you to say anything that you shouldn't say or that would compromise this, but the legal expenses are getting to be crazy at this point. Does the school board have any initiatives or a strategy as to how we bring that back into line with something that's reasonable for a school district? Again, please don't say anything that would compromise it or that you shouldn't, but is that something that the school board is and the superintendent are working on?
Yeah, Dan, it's a fair question. And without getting into specifics, I can just tell you this, that, we are imposing, upon council to be as efficient as possible. If there's things, especially with right to know act things, which a lot of the expenses I gather, and I don't know the exact breakdown or sort of category. When a right to know request comes in, it may be for thousands of documents that need to be went through and redacted, potentially for confidential information that can't be disclosed. And an example of efficiency, instead of having counsel do it, maybe have a paralegal do it at a lower rate. So we've looked at that, and if the paralegal has a legal question, then they can go to the attorney. But the attorney's not doing it at the full rate. But there was a fair amount of right to know related expense this year, and ongoing litigation.
Okay, thank you. Other questions for Dave or for Mike from the committee?
I guess maybe along that line, can the budget committee step in and on behalf of the school or the town try to recover monies from this guy, because it'll show that what he's doing is excessive. It's basically harassment.
I think Joe, it's a fair question. It's a very good point. It's something we've asked. Okay, New Hampshire's right to know law is very broad. Some would argue that that's a good thing for transparency and people's access to government. But there's not a lot of teeth to it, for districts or towns or to less abuses. So we've asked that question, believe me, of council, if there was a way we could go back and try to collect any of this. And the simple answer is it's very unlikely. We'd probably spend more money trying to chase it than we could expect to get back. So it's you know, I not meaning to be flip, but the best thing you can do is appeal to the legislature and put some teeth into it. Other states' laws have you know, attorney's fee provisions if people abuse it. New Hampshire doesn't.
Yeah, that was going to be my thought as well. Anybody who's listening who feels strongly about this, I know Mike Cahill has heard a fair bit from folks, some folks in town anyway, about this, and you know, any feedback you can give Mike that in turn Mike can take to the legislature can only help our case here. Anybody else have questions? Going once, going twice. Thank you, Dave. We appreciate your time. Appreciate the detail and the good answers to the questions. Like I said, if you can get back to us in the next, you know, few weeks with some idea of that anticipated additional spend that above and beyond what's presented here and roughly how that buckets out, we'd appreciate it.
Thank you, and I will get back, and the school board obviously will be dealing with this for most of this month as we go forward, along with the administration. So we certainly will get back to you.
Thank you. All right. Looking at the agenda, I put a placeholder on here for review of the summer meeting calendar. All I really had in mind was, you know, I had distributed a prospective calendar after the last meeting. Does anybody have anything, any objections to that? Any suggestions, anything that they'd like to have different? Hearing none, we'll proceed on that basis. Any other business that any committee members would like to raise before we adjourn?
So so we still have budget committee, correct?
That's correct.
And
Thank you actually for bringing that up.
Okay.
Anybody, you know, again, please, if you know people in the community who'd have an interest in serving, again, I think I mentioned this during our initial formation meeting in April, but you know, we do like to have a full slate of committee members voting on the budget. So, you know, we'd like to fill that last spot if possible.
Perhaps Steve sends out a weekly letter. Maybe he can put something in his weekly.
Yeah, let me look. I could have sworn that that's already in there somewhere, but I'll double check and see.
And one other thing I noticed on the Channel 13, they had the old budget committee member names on it. So maybe you could smack them up.
Yeah.
Update that.
Yeah, Channel 13, if you guys are listening, and I know you are, if you guys could update our introductory slide for the meetings and get the current composition of the committee, we'd appreciate it. We don't want people bothering Mickey at home with their issues.
Yes, we do.
Okay, you're right. We probably do, but we're going to say the nice thing. Last call for other business. Hearing none, I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Oh, come on, don't be shy.
I move.
So motion to adjourn. Oh, okay.
All right, I think we have a motion from Roger and a second from Joe. All those in favor, we have to do a roll call vote. I'm sorry. In favor of adjournment, Jeff.
Aye.
Rob Ortons.
Aye.
Roger Cady.
Aye.
Joe Lamatina.
Aye.
John Baldy.
Aye.
Mike LeBranch.
Aye.
Eric Wagode.
Aye.
Zach Dumont,
Aye.
Mike Kennison,
Aye.
and the chair votes aye. We are unanimous. Thank you, everybody. Have a good evening.